Welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for November 10, 2024. Today we're talking with member of the Armenian Parliament, Arthur Khachatryan. But first I want to say to our listeners that Hovik and I really appreciate your comments and engagement on our YouTube channel. We value your input, your comments, and read all of them. So please keep letting us know what you think about the topics we're discussing and share our videos with anyone that you think is interested in them. If you can, of course, we'd love it if you join our community by becoming a sustaining supporter through a monthly contribution. Check us out at podcasts.groong.org/donates. Welcome back, Arthur. Great to have you with us.
Welcome, Arthur.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your invitation.
Great to have you. Hovik, this past weekend marked the somber anniversary. We always talk on this show about the November 9-10 Trilateral Ceasefire agreement that Russia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan signed 4 years ago. How did you mark it?
Well, I just want to add that last week Armenians marked the 4th year since the November 9-10, 2020 so-called ceasefire that Armenians were made to believe was going to be the end of the brutal 44-day war over Artsakh. Many thought that was going to be the lowest point in recent Armenian history, and now it feels like the start of an even darker chapter. And in just 3 years, Artsakh has lost its entire Armenian population. An ethnic cleansing, a genocide happened on our watch, Asbed. Under the Pashinyan regime, which once rallied people with the slogan, Artsakh is Armenia, the official stance of the Armenian regime has now taken a drastic turn. Today, as many Armenian military leaders and prisoners of war are languishing in Azerbaijani prisons, there is a surreal and unsettling disconnect as Pashinyan now avoids even secret visits to the Yera Blur Memorial. And his wife, Anna Hakopian, last week, was sharing pictures from her safari in Africa. So yes, it is quite a surreal experience. And at the same time, Azerbaijan is hosting COP29, attempting to spotlight itself on the global stage while maintaining its military threats against Armenia. I can say that we're living through a continuous nightmare, but let's ask our guest, Arthur. We all reflect on this, I think, in our own different ways. Can you tell us, what does this day mean to you personally?
Well, to start with, I agree with every single word you said about the saddest day in the new history, about Pashinyan's 180-degree turn, about celebrating that day in Safari. Today at the parliament, the deputy chairman of the civil contract party said that in real Armenia there is no place for Artsakh. Well, this is the day of national shame, national sorrow, and we have to do everything to turn the vehicle of the history. Artsakh, people of Artsakh, have their right to decide on their own political destiny. Neither Pashinyan, nor Aliyev, nor Erdogan can deprive the people of Artsakh of their homeland. No one has given the right Pashinyan to do so. So, for us, age of Artsakh isn't closed. We should pursue, and we will pursue, the respect of the rights of people of Artsakh. We will pursue reopening of the page of negotiations of political settlement of the conflict based on 3 basic principles suggested by the Minsk co-chairs based on Helsinki Final Act core principles. For me, personally, it's the day of loss of friends and family members. Before that, I was thinking that when we were going to Yerablur, not secretly, we were thanking our martyrs there. Now when we go there, I have problems looking at the tombs. I feel shame. I feel shame for the government, for the official position of Armenia.
Indeed. And I share that shame as well. Let's move on and discuss a couple of developments that are likely to affect the talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This all happened last week. And I want to remind that we're recording this on Wednesday, November 13th, and we're discussing what happened until today. So Farid Shafiev, head of the think tank funded by the Office of the Azerbaijani President, revealed on Twitter 3 points that have not yet been agreed upon as part of these so-called peace negotiations. One of those points is the change of Armenia's constitution through referendum. The second point was phrased as legal, as Armenia continuing to try to fight Azerbaijan in courts and through international organizations. I interpret that as essentially maybe like Azerbaijanis have frequently said that Armenia should renounce all legal claims. And number three is the withdrawal of the EU mission in Armenia. Surprise, surprise. We're now hearing this openly. So, in addition to those three points that are not agreed upon, Shafiev talks about, quote, demilitarization of Armenia. I have, and I'm quoting him, he says, I have heard some arguments that the peace treaty cannot guarantee any sustainable security, just like the Budapest Memorandum of 1994 failed to guarantee Ukraine's territorial integrity, despite written commitments from the signatory parties. Thus, the only guarantee is the situation on the ground, which means Armenia should be limited in its military capacity, i.e., demilitarized. To me, this is the most worrisome point, and I'm just interested to see how Azerbaijan plans to do this. Let me ask first, Shafiev is highly connected. How reliable are these claims? And why is Aliyev's office essentially leaking this information now? Because I'm interpreting that this is Aliyev essentially leaking this.
Well, obviously, Shaf, there are no free and independent think tanks in Azerbaijan. This one is very closely linked to the government, to the regime. Obviously, Aliyev spoke with lips of Farid Shahev. The 3 points that Azerbaijan decided to disclose just on the verge of COP29 were not secret, actually. They were talking about that at least for the last 6 months. At least for 3 months. Let me be more precise. After humiliating Pashinyan, Aliyev now wants to humiliate the whole nation. He wants to force the population, an Armenian nation, to go to polling station and to change the referendum under the threat from Azerbaijan to launch another war against Armenia. Even if Pashinyan kneels down and agrees to hold a referendum, I hope that the nation will neglect both Aliyev and Pashinyan. Second, about renouncing the legal claims against Azerbaijan. Well, Azerbaijan understands that in international courts they will lose the issue because what they've done since 2020 and 21 till complete ethnic cleansing, genocide of people of Artsakh in Artsakh Republic, they're going to lose the case. That's why then they understand that they cannot press on judges. So he decides to press on Pashinyan, understanding how much Pashinyan depends on Aliyev. And third, about withdrawal of EU mission, the Euro monitors appeared on the frontiers between Armenia and Azerbaijan in late 2022. Since the very first day, Azerbaijan was against of that. And it's very interesting, actually, because when Pashinyan was talking about, first time, in the beginning, we started talking about the European monitors, how he justified inviting them to Armenia. I think in the beginning, there were about 45, 46 people only. He said that Azerbaijan has concerns that Armenia and Russia are going to wage a war against Azerbaijan. So to dismiss their concerns, we are inviting the Euro monitor so that they can monitor the situation and confirm that Armenia doesn't have such plans. This is strange. If this was the case, then Azerbaijan would demand not 46 but 460 monitors and another 4,600 to be stationed on the frontier, on the border from Azeristan. So Pashinyan started the whole story with the European mission with a shameful lie. Of course, Azerbaijan doesn't want to have anyone that can witness the provocation. That's why Azerbaijan demands Armenia and European Union to withdraw these Euro monitors. And by the way, initially they were talking about they were demanding that no third country troops or third country representatives shall be on the border. I think now they just talk about EU mission, but initially they were talking about no third country national military or disarmed on the borders.
Interesting.
The last issue mentioned is more worrying. Regarding this demilitarization of Armenia, it's the most worrisome point in Farichayev's statement, though it's not new. Just after 44-day war, Aliyev completely was saying that Azerbaijan will hit any military unit if it sees that the military unit is building up its potential, whether it's on the border or deep in Armenian territory. And they were saying that Armenia was an aggressor country, an invader, so Armenia's military potential shall be curtailed. Armenia shall not be allowed to restore its military potential. We've seen from the history that this is how the winner treats with the loser. And this statement is another argument, it's another proof that the document that's being circulated between Armenia and Azerbaijan is not a peace treaty. It's not a treaty, it's not about a peace that will be based on justice and equity. It's just another act of capitulation. And I am afraid Azerbaijan will push for an unconditional act of capitulation, because the more Armenia goes for concessions, more demands emerge from Azeri side. Armenian officials are saying that 13 out of 16 paragraphs or articles have been agreed. 2 of them have been agreed partially. There is only disagreement on 1 article only. And Azerbaijan basically says that there are 3 more unagreed articles. So I won't be surprised to know that after each session, each round of exchange of documents, Azerbaijan adds more and more demands.
Right.
But Pashinyan keeps this document confidential, even violating the law. By the way, we have appealed to the court by violating the legislation and depriving us from our right to get acquainted to secret documents.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, it happened after hysteria in Azerbaijan, when Azeris started yelling and screaming that Pashinyan allows the revanchists, i.e. opposition, to be informed about the process of negotiations.
Yeah, I remember that. And essentially what happened is Pashinyan publicly said, I will no longer allow the opposition to view these documents because of some bullshit reason.
Well, he says that you read the documents and you distort the content of the document to the public. Okay. If there's a distortion or the leakage of information, okay, then they can take us to court because of violation of national legislation. And
Yes.
if Pashinyan says that we are distorting the situation, distorting the picture, he can publish the document. When I asked Pashinyan, what are the points that they have agreed on, and what are the points that they hadn't agreed on yet or failed to agree, he says, well, that will violate the diplomatic decorum, so I cannot disclose that. And what we saw, Azeris leaked the information.
That's the amazing part. When the Armenian government does not want to communicate this to even parliamentarians in the country, and Azerbaijan is publicly posting this on Twitter or X or whatever.
Well, look, Pashinyan is the prime minister who stood up publicly, said to the people and said, if I have a solution of the conflict, I would come to you, my people, and consult with you. Never, ever, you will wake up one day and know that I've signed a document behind your back, behind the scenes. Now he keeps that in secrecy. He's negotiating something he calls peace agreement. Moreover, today at the parliament, he says that I sent to Azerbaijan an offer to regulate Armenia-Azerbaijan relations for the next hundreds years, next centuries. I believe the people of Armenia have the right to know what kind of relations Pashinyan has prepared for the nation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arthur, we are in the middle of this, deranged show that is called the COP29 conference in Baku. We were previously asking, is it possible that there will be some last-minute surprise and another humiliating document will be signed? But Arat Mirzoyan was cautiously optimistic, I guess, last week, and full of vague answers to these things, to questions about these points of disagreement. Is it possible that last minute, because COP29 ends on November 22nd. Is it possible that last minute something will be signed or Armenian officials will decide to visit Baku after all? What are your thoughts on, and what is your reading on that?
Well, I believe there are some secret conversation going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan even today, because Armenia hasn't, because Azerbaijan invited Armenia, like they invited everyone. Armenia hasn't gone to Baku yet. The government hasn't gone to Baku, at least as of this point in time. But they've never issued a statement saying that they will not participate in COP29, explaining why they were not going to participate. So this makes me think that there are still some negotiation. There is a deal that they are bargaining over. I think Armenia demands release of, let's say, 5 prisoners of war, so that Mirzoyan can bring them back to Armenia and say and demonstrate that, present this as their diplomatic victory. I think they are now just haggling over a number of prisoners of war. Obviously, this doesn't include the leadership of Artsakh Republic. Well, I understand there is a moral pressure that every life matters, but COP29 has such a big significance for Azerbaijan, so that if Armenia, while endorsing Azerbaijan's candidacy for hosting COP29, has required release of all political prisoners of war and political prisoners, Azerbaijan would agree. But they didn't have the guts to do so. But even today, if they require or demand release of all prisoners in return to their showing up at the COP29, I think Azerbaijan would agree. But they don't have the guts. I don't believe in that. Plus, I am more than sure that Pashinyan himself doesn't want Arayik Harutyunyan, Bako Sahakian, Arkady Hokasyan, Ruben Vartanian, David Ishkhanian, David Sedrakian, David Babayan, not Sedrakian, David Manucharyan, David Babayan, and Leverman Sakanian to return. Because all his policy based on a hypocritical hypothesis that there was changing the government, there was a coup d'etat in Artsakh Republic, and that sparked Azeris or provoked Azeris war against Artsakh Republic. So imagine Arayik Harutyunyan comes to Armenia and says, no, there was no coup d'etat, and I was not forced to resign. I did that myself voluntarily because I had lost the governance of the country. Pashinyan's all arguments will just ruin it. So I'm more than sure Pashinyan doesn't want to be back in Armenia.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Arthur, because it's not clear to me that Pashinyan wants these prisoners, the leadership of Artsakh, back in Armenia.
Well, you see, they didn't. The parliamentary majority, Pashinyan's party, sabotaged yesterday's National Assembly's address, calling on Azerbaijan to release Armenia's prisoners of war and other prisoners.
Yeah.
Calling on international community to exert pressure on Azerbaijan. They just didn't do that. Of course, they say because the diplomacy is not always public. We do tremendous job behind the screen. The result of this tremendous job is nil. But the true reason is, first of all, Aliyev doesn't allow them to issue such a statement, and second, they themselves do not want the leaders of Artsakh Republic to be back.
Arthur, let me take us on just a little different direction. Trump will take over as president of the United States on January 20th. He has promised to end the Ukraine war, the Israeli wars on Gaza and Lebanon. He has promised to restore peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and he has referred to Artsakh by its Armenian name, Artsakh, and the ethnic cleansing of its Armenian Christian population. But it seems to us that the Pashinyan government would really have preferred to see Kamala Harris win. Do you think that's the case?
Obviously.
And if so, why?
I agree with you. I have that feeling myself too. First, they started the change of the Armenia's foreign policy during the Democrats' administration. Possibly they have received some sort of guarantees or assurances from the U.S. administration. Now it's a change of the administration, obviously change of the foreign policy, change of regional policy. They don't know what's going to happen. And they know too that Republicans are known for concentration mainly on the domestic issues, while Democrats, I don't want to say expansionist, but Democrats are more eager to spread democracy around the world. But how Trump would act depends on what does Armenian government want from the US.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot expect saying that, President Trump, please do something good for Armenia. Armenia's government shall be proactive, shall be initiative. Okay, there shall be an initiative. Okay, what do we want? Today, Armenia's government says we don't want any external intermediation, any external intervention. We work with Azerbaijan to settle our problems. I would like to remind you Pashinyan's interview to 6 representatives of mass media from the United Kingdom. I think it was the journalist from The Guardian who says that the United Kingdom has invested more than 20 billion pounds in the Azerbaijani economy, and the United Kingdom has some leverage over Azerbaijan. Would you like us to exert pressure on Azerbaijan? You remember Pashinyan's answer? Well, we need peace, first of all, ourselves, so we can take care. So basically, this is again kneeling to the demand from
Dropped
Azerbaijan.
It on the floor.
Yep, from Azerbaijan and Turkey. Remember when, like, good old times, 10, 20, 30 years ago, when a country would recognize Armenia's genocide, Turkey would say recognition of the genocide impedes or it's an obstacle towards establishing normal relations with Armenia. So stay away, we'll do ourselves. Now, Aliyev, after 44-day war, says the international community had failed as international mediator, so you stay away, we'll take care of our relations ourselves. So again, Pashinyan doesn't have the guts to appeal to the third countries, to appeal to Trump. I don't know what are the relations on the executive level, government of Armenia and the administration. But I know that on parliamentary level, I know from the contacts with representatives from the United States that they said that Ambassador Maguns has never come to us and asked to do something. Okay, just support Armenia's democracy and this kind of hotel. So how Trump will act depends on what Armenia would want from Trump.
And so I was going to actually ask you, now that he has won, how should Armenia engage Trump?
I think Armenia has to ask Trump to tame Turkey, because Turkey is Americans' major alliance, and obviously you remember, the joint statement by Fidan and Secretary Blinken on the 65th anniversary of establishment of strategic partnership between the U.S. and Turkey. I think the Armenian government has to ask Mr. Trump, to exert pressure on Turkey to open up the borders, has to exert pressure on Azerbaijan, and unlike during his first term, to be more empathetic with Armenia and understand the importance of relations between Armenia and Iran. Because I think it was these days in 2018 when John Bolton came to Armenia, what I read from American press, and I'm talking about Jamestown Report and so on, that saying that the United States will not tolerate close relationship between Armenia and Iran. So that happened for the first time when Pashinyan was a prime minister. I hope now he will understand, or he wouldn't say it, his new national service advisor to give this message to Armenia. And we also hope that the end of the war in Ukraine will also create more favorable or more partnership relations between Russia and the Western partners, and the Minsk group will restart its operations, and the international mediators will provide platform where Armenia and Azerbaijan can negotiate on Armenia-Azerbaijan relations and on the right of the people of Artsakh.
When you said that the United States or Trump should put pressure on Turkey to open up the border, you mean that in a sense, unconditionally without waiting on this Azerbaijani so-called peace plan, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, because blocking the communication is act of hostility. It's an act of
It's an act of
animosity.
war.
It's an act of war. Yeah, it's an act of war that shall be stopped. Turkey closed the roads in April 1993 when the Defense Army of Artsakh Republic liberated Karvajar. Now, when Pashinyan surrendered Karvajar to Azerbaijan without a single bullet, the reason why Turkey has closed the borders has disappeared. So Turkey shall unconditionally open the borders. And the same basically refers to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan now refers to the shameful trilateral statement saying that Armenia promised to open up the road between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan, but Azerbaijan forgets that the statement also says about opening up of all communication links, including Ijevan Gaza.
A lot of economists that we've talked to have also expressed some concern about an open border between Armenia and Turkey, in the sense that such a large country with cheap goods could flood the Armenian market very easily.
Sure.
I guess we can talk about that some other time because that wasn't on our list of topics. Could you tell us how you would like to see the Armenian-American diaspora engage Trump? What can we do for you?
Well, to start with, the government of Armenia shall work with the diaspora, and diaspora shall work with the government of Armenia. Now, the government of Armenia has done everything possible to alienate itself, so that the diaspora alienates itself from Armenia.
True.
Done everything. What they do through the embassies, through infamous Zara Sinanian, is attempt to destroy political, cultural, religious institutes, diaspora institutes that are active in diaspora. Look at the summit they've done. I think it was a very, global summit, something like that. They didn't invite institutions. They invited single individuals. So they try to deinstitutionalize the diaspora. And again, they do everything so that Armenia and diaspora get far from each other. The same policy that Levon Ter-Petrosyan was pursuing. In March 1991, he basically categorized Armenians into two groups. Armenians of Armenia who struggle and suffer, and Armenians in diaspora who eat oranges. Pashinyan's government does exactly the same. When Armenia's policy returns to its national rails, it shall work with Armenian diaspora so that diaspora can help Armenia and the Armenian government. Now, when Pashinyan says, my responsibility is towards only 3 million people, Armenian citizens, this means basically I don't care about Artsakh, and I don't care about millions of Armenians who live in diaspora. Why should diaspora care about Armenia? Our vision of Armenia is that Armenia is homeland of all Armenians, and it's duty of every Armenian in Armenia, in Artsakh, well, hopefully one day, in diaspora, work towards prosperity of Armenia. And it's a responsibility of Armenian government to protect any Armenian anywhere in the world. In Armenia, in Lebanon, in Jerusalem, in Syria, in Iraq, in Russia, in Ukraine, in Georgia. But Pashinyan says, okay, all I care, 3 million people only.
So what can our community do to advocate for Armenia's needs? What do you want to see from us?
Well, I was talking about calling on Mr. Trump's administration to exert pressure on Azerbaijan. Plus, I would like to see diaspora working with new administration on keeping the issue of right of return of people of Artsakh home on international agendas, demand release of Armenian prisoners, and I think that Armenia needs foreign aid from the US. I mean, economic aid, military aid. So working on local level, working on national level, working with the capital, Congress, working with the administration, with the White House.
Let's go on to our second topic, the 2025 state budget, which is being discussed in the parliament right now. So let's not talk about all the numbers. The budget expenditures of $9 billion, a budget deficit of $1.5 billion, based on economic growth of 5.6% and an inflation rate of 3.5%. We'll put all the numbers in the show notes, podcasts.groong.org/episode number. Arthur, what are your thoughts about this budget that is in discussion in the parliament? Given that this government has a dismal record of hitting its targets, both in expenditures as well as revenues, do these targets sound reasonable to you?
No, today I classified the budget as it's not a budget, it's a manual, how to live on debt, because Armenia's economic growth shall be attributed solely to the debt that Armenia has borrowed extensively and external factors. Plus, it's a budget of undelivered promises, and it's a budget of unrealistic dreams. The government has promised at least 7% annual growth, 9% if they are favorable for external conditions. This year, Armenia's expected annual growth will be 5.8%, next year 5.6%. So the favorable external environment, external conditions are disappearing, and the favorable conditions are attributed to the war in Ukraine, because Russia was under sanctions and Armenia basically helped Russia. Let me use this politically neutral word. Now this is disappearing. That's why the growth rate has slowed down extensively. We are seeing heavy landing or rough landing of the economy. This year, they failed to meet any of their targets of economic growth, of increase of industrial output, increase of the agricultural output, inflation. They underperformed our capital expenditures. They've underperformed all of the government programs. They failed to collect budgeted taxes. They failed to generate other revenues, attract foreign grants as it was budgeted. And for the next year, the situation will be even worse. The exports will fall by nearly 40%. Can you imagine that? Nearly 40%.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the growth that's on the paper is completely false. Like, the driving force behind the growth of economy is gold production. There's no gold production in Armenia. No way Armenia could produce 10 tons of gold. This is imports
It's the
from Russia.
re-export economy that's going on.
Absolutely.
Stuff coming in and stuff coming out.
But look,
the one question I have, Arthur, is that stuff getting taxed? Is there any benefit to people, to the country?
Very, very little, because it's import or export. Okay, it's not a final consumption in Armenia. There is no multiplying effect. Few businesses, few families, if not only one family or few families, benefits tremendously, but there is no spillover effect. But look, okay, they are more cunning than you would imagine.
So I'm going to call it welfare for oligarchs.
Absolutely. One or two oligarchs and the families who are... Anyway, they don't only show that it's increasing foreign trade, they also show that it's increase in industrial output of Armenia. But again, Armenia doesn't have the capacity to produce 10 tons of gold. There's no industrial capacity. I'm not talking about gold ore. I'm talking about gold.
No, I understand.
Gold.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, it was jewelry. They showed that the output of the jewelry output has increased 23.6 times. And jewelry, you understand, okay, you cannot in 1 year increase the output 23.6 times. I'm talking about jewelry. I'm not talking about bakery.
Arthur, two areas are a concern for me in this budget. The first one is the national debt. On the macro level, the national debt is rising sharply. The government expects like a 53.5% debt to GDP rate, which is manageable. But just in the past few months, we've heard about $500 to $600 million of international loans adding to this national debt. This is just the last couple of months in the news. What's fueling all this borrowing? And is the money, most importantly, is this money going towards expanding the economy, or is it just going to operational expenses and evaporating?
Yeah, and also, if I can add, what is the risk if, let's say, next year the war in Ukraine stops or changes its modality and, Russia is no longer under sanctions?
Well, let me start from the second question. Already today, when I was saying that the external favorable conditions are disappearing, we see that today. Armenia imported and re-exported 10 tons of gold. During the last quarter, there was only 330 kilos. So the chicken that was laying gold eggs is in a soup already. We see that remittances have diminished sharply. We see that the Russian reluctance to create extra demand that favorably impacted Armenia's economy have left the country. And we see the trend. This is disappearing. If the sanctions are lifted, then there won't be any favorable conditions, any favorable environment for Armenia. Armenia has lost the chance of capitalizing on these 3 years of growth. The industrial potential, the economic potential of Armenia hasn't increased. We haven't seen any single new factory in Armenia. We haven't seen that. Industrial output hasn't increased. We haven't seen development in agriculture. We haven't seen development in service sector. And this is the reason why the exports will go down by 40%, why the economy will slow down, why the deficit increases, why they go for extra borrowing. You are right that the national debt will reach to $16 billion by the end of 2025. Servicing of debt is more than $1 billion annually. This is more than the budget of Ministry of Healthcare, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Foreign Relations, Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Economy, Ministry for High Tech, Presidential Administration, Prime Minister's Administration, National Assembly, the governors. This is the third largest expense item in the budget. The ratio of loan to GDP worsens. And according to the debt policy of Armenia, the policy was to borrow more in national currency. For 2025, borrowings in foreign currency, in dollars and euros, will increase. This means Armenia has to have more dollars and euros to service foreign debt. This means that Armenia will not sterilize inflow of currency, foreign currency to Armenia. And dram will remain heavy to allow Armenia to service its debt. Heavy dram kills Armenia's exports. So it's a vicious cycle. You shall have economy to service the debt. But the more you borrow and the more you borrow in dollars kills your economy. And government doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
Previously, they were borrowing for concrete projects. Okay. Borrow from the World Bank, EBRD, Asian Development Bank, KfW Bank from Germany for specific projects. Now these are budget support loans. Budget support loans cannot be traced. You cannot assess effectiveness of these loans.
So there's no way to trace exactly how it is spent, you're saying?
Absolutely. And by the way, if you look at the budget for 2024, in the budget numbers, the state deficit was supposed to be 340 billion drams. Now, the expected deficit will be 480 billion drams, 40% increase. So if this trend continues in 2025, the amount of borrowing will go up even more than $16 billion.
That's right. So my concern actually is exactly in this area, that while the economy looks like it is set to shrink over the balance of 2024 and possibly in 2025, and I think the Minister of Finance, was it yesterday, was sounding some alarms about this. Just yesterday, I read this in the news. The debt to GDP ratio will go will skyrocket because the GDP number goes down, because the current numbers, as far as I know, also include the re-export economy, which has tanked since May.
Sure.
Let me move to my second concern, because we're running out of time, Arthur. The defense budget is the second area of concern. There's a 20% growth in the defense budget that's earmarked to increase resilience of Armenia's security. This is language that is supposed to be inoffensive to Azerbaijan, I'm sure. So in 2025, the defense budget will be $1.7 billion compared to Azerbaijan's $5 billion. They revised it up from 3.9 to 5 now. And I just want to give for reference, Russia is also boosting its defense in 2025 by over 30% to $142 billion. So the question, did the government fulfill last year's $1.3 billion defense budget? Are we safer for having spent that money on defense? What do we have to show for it?
The government has failed on all its programs. Still a month and a half to go till the end of the year. Plus, I'm constrained to disclose confidential information. But look, okay, this government boasts that Armenia has never spent $1.5 billion on defense. This is a pure populism and manipulation. First of all, Armenia has lost a huge part, I don't know the numbers, of its military potential to Azerbaijan. Has lost its military potential as a result of 44-day war. So Armenia has to restore first the level it had before the war. Okay, like imagine a household, okay? We buy cutlery, we buy kitchen silver, we buy stuff. Yeah, we buy TV set, we buy sofa, we buy furniture. Little bit, okay, because we add on existing furniture, existing hi-fi, existing cutlery, existing wardrobe. Now, if there is a fire, you lose everything. Then obviously you have to spend more to restore what you had before the fire. We lost our military potential because of wrong foreign policy, because of mismanaged war. Okay, so they don't have any justification for boasting. Second, dollars, the purchasing power of a dollar. Okay, before the war in Ukraine and now in Middle East, let's assume that the price per bullet, a simple bullet, okay, for a machine gun, was 1 cent. Now it is 5 cents. So the purchasing power of $1.5 billion equals to $300 million only in like 2020 terms. So they basically blow hot air. They cheat the public. They mislead the public about the military budget.
So when you said that this government did not spend 1.3 or 1.5 billion
I didn't say that. I said that as of today, they haven't met their targets. Okay, but it doesn't mean that they will not meet their target by 31st of December. And I didn't give you the numbers, okay?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that, okay, when they said Armenia has never spent, has never had this large military budget, I am arguing that the purchasing power of this military budget is 5 times, is equal to $300 million in comparable prices of 2016, 17, 18, 20 even. Plus, you have lost huge chunk of your military potential. You have to restore that. You have to restore that. You are not increasing, you are not adding on military power of Armenia. You still have to bring it to the level, pre-war level. That's my point. They have increased that by 20%. The police budget was increased by 18% to 100 billion drams. Why on earth?
Yeah.
So they have to cut on police budget and channel the funds to the military budget.
But I see that the opposite is happening.
Yes. Why the patrol, okay, a cop on the street, why shall he receive more than a soldier in the trenches on the border? This is not fair.
Well, I am very concerned about that, especially in light of this Eagle Partner military exercise held between the US and Armenia last year, which some observers said was more of a
Oh,
crowd control thing rather than military. So my
sure.
question was going to be, is the money for defense being used to turn the army into a police force that's going to
Well,
control the Armenians?
it's a very, very good point. A few hundred peacekeepers participated in this military training. And when you read the description, the scope of the training, it includes crowd control, which is police operation. Well,
Yeah.
obviously, they can justify saying that, well, Armenia participates in peacekeeping operations, for instance, in Kosovo, and frequently there is public unrest in Kosovo, and the peacekeepers have to control the crowd. But I have a reasonable doubt that not only military personnel, but also riot police participated in this training.
Right. Arthur, we still have so many questions for you, and I hope that we don't abuse your very
Well,
valuable time.
I'm
But
always at your service, so
so we have
we
many.
can have
So
another session.
let's move on because we have internal politics to talk about. The parliament recently passed a new law encouraging retired low and mid-level officers to rejoin the army, yet keep their pensions. Before the law, those who would like to rejoin the military essentially would lose their retirement pensions. So
Mhm.
I wanted to ask Arthur, is this a smart law and why is this law needed? Is there a manpower shortage? What is the government trying to fix with this law?
It's a manpower shortage. Only that. Obviously, it's a shortage of manpower. After the loss in 44-day war, after losing Artsakh, the line of contact between Armenia and Azerbaijan has increased tremendously. We just do not have enough personnel to protect the whole perimeter of the border.
Yeah.
I'm also going to bring in the fact that we lost 5,000 men during the 44-day
Sure.
war and over 10,000 to 15,000 injuries, and Armenia has not recovered from that.
And of course, with
Sure.
all this defeatist discussions, I don't know why would anyone in their right mind decide to join the army. There is this speculations that many boys
Mm-hmm.
who live in Armenia, they have dual citizenship, and their parents are essentially preparing for them to leave the country when they become military age. So that's a really, and I know we're short on time, but I want to share this personal anecdote because we moved to Armenia 2 years ago when we were trying to get citizenship for our son, who is
Mm-hmm.
6 years old. The the officials, were giving us weird eyes, like why are you trying to have your son become a citizen? And this is a real concern that nobody talks about. So we know that there's a shortage, so maybe this is needed. But is the law being applied fairly? What about all those military officers who could join the army, but their time passed? This seems like a measure that would only benefit those who are currently standing to benefit from this. So how could this law be more fair?
Well, look, many retired officers do not have source of income to ensure their decent life. So many of them will rejoin army because of financial or social reasons. Second, many will join the army because they are patriots. They think that they are useful. They are sure that they are useful to the army, to the motherland. But again, when this government says Armenia has never been as safe as it is today, this law shows that there are very serious security concerns, that Armenia has to call the retired officers to rejoin the military service. This is the issue. Simultaneously, not too many servicemen of Defense Army of Artsakh Republic have offered service in the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Armenia, in the Armenian Army. And many former servicemen of Defense Army of Artsakh Republic complain that they are left unattended. That's a very serious issue.
Moving on, there is a new justice minister in Armenia after the previous justice minister, Grigor Minasyan, resigned. There are reports that the call for resignations was because of apparently a deputy minister of justice was seen with a daughter of the former president. I don't know how true is this, but after a month of intra-party drama, civil
Mhm.
contract appointed Srbuhi Galyan as the new minister of justice. I believe she's not even 35 yet. Nothing against young people being really smart and accomplished, but a lot of
She's 32.
qualified people, yeah, a lot of qualified people were passed over, including Yevgeny Kirakosyan, who was previously our lawyer in the international organizations. What are the reasons behind this shuffle? And is a new person, Srbuhi Galyan, capable, qualified? Who is she?
Well, I have no idea who is she. I have several hypotheses why Grigor Minassian was fired or he was forced to resign. But Serpui Galyan is said to be member of political team of Nikol Pashinyan and his party. But I want to remind you that previously she served as deputy prosecutor. So the deputy prosecutor general of this country is a partisan person, member of political team of the prime minister. The prosecutor general was former aide to the prime minister. So the prosecutor's office, the general prosecutor's office, is a highly politicized, highly partisan institution, which is awful. Prosecutor shall be truly independent. Prosecutor's office, prosecutor general are politicized people. This is unacceptable. And after this, you cannot say that Armenia is a democratic country. In democratic countries, you do not have political appointees. This is more important than what credentials does Serpui Galyan have. I have no idea. For the first time in my life, I heard that name when she was appointed as Minister of Justice.
Interesting. Okay, for the last topic that we want to cover, Arthur, there's constant evidence that the authorities are preparing for elections, and two potential legislative measures spearheaded by civil contract are drawing speculation and criticism from various angles. First, there are attempts to change the Armenian constitution, not through referendum, but via parliamentary vote, to remove the stable majority clause from the constitution. For those who don't know, according to the current constitution, which was introduced by Ser Sargsyan as part of the 2015 reforms, the party or alliance that gets the majority of votes will automatically receive sufficient bonus mandates to give it a 54% of the mandates. Essentially, that's what's called stable majority. And the council, examining the constitutional changes, voted in favor of a proposal by the Union of Informed Citizens, headed by Daniel Ioannisyan, to remove this stable majority clause. Now, it should be mentioned that this council is mostly made up, if not fully made up, of Pashinyan sympathizers because the opposition has been boycotting it. But at the same time as voting for this clause, the council voted against separating this issue from the general packet of constitutional reforms so that it could be expedited and voted on by the National Assembly ahead of the 2026 scheduled elections. Daniel Ioannisyan had in the past stated that he really wants this reform to happen first before any future referendum on the constitution, so that the 2026 elections could take place with this new removal of the stable majority. So that's very curious to me. The other potentially more concerning issue is a measure by civil contract to allow the cancellation of election results if martial law or state of emergency is declared. And this measure has already passed in the first reading. So first, let's focus on the stable majority. Can you let us know what is this issue and why are the government forces now, after they benefited from it tremendously during the last elections, are now trying to remove it?
I really don't know. I really don't know. Possibly they don't exclude the chance of losing the elections and they don't want the winner to get the bonus that they've benefited greatly. Like Pashinyan, his party got 53 point something in a popular vote, but at National Assembly it has more than it has about 70%. But what's more worrying is this cancellation of election results during the martial law or state of emergency. This basically means that if Pashinyan sees that he's losing the elections, he can provoke civil unrest in Armenia and cancel the results of the elections. annul the results of elections, or if Aliyev sees that Pashinyan is losing the power and the next government will be more tough on Armenia-Azerbaijan relations, he can, as a minor provocation on the borders, and Pashinyan will capitalize on that and declare martial law and basically annul the elections. So we see that Pashinyan is ready for everything to keep his power.
This is a criticism, obviously, that not just you, but other opposition members have put forth. And before people start saying that we're being too conspiratorial, let me just remind our listeners that the Armenian government has used the state of emergency powers to prevent elections, such as the constitutional referendum that happened in 2020. They didn't lift the state of emergency for a long time, despite threats from COVID diminishing, until the point where and because if they did, then they would have to continue with the constitutional referendum, which they didn't think that would pass, in my opinion. So, yeah, I mean, these are all interesting. So with this election law, it passed the first reading. Do you expect any major changes to it before it comes for second reading? And do you expect any challenges to this when Pashinyan?
Well, look, this is not basically the area that I concentrate on. But if there is a political decision on Pashinyan's level, this parliament will rubber stamp it.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the parliamentary country, we do not see a real parliament. It's not the parliament that has formed the government. It is the government that has formed this parliament. I'm talking about the parliamentary majority.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that happy note, I guess we're going to close it there. Thank you, Arthur, for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Always pleasure.
Thank you, Arthur.
Always pleasure.
That was our Week in Review show recorded on November 13, 2024. We've been talking with Mr. Arthur Khachatryan, who is an MP from the Hayastan Dashinq Armenia Alliance in the Armenian Parliament and a member of the Armenian Revolutionary Federation, the ARF Dashinq. In the past, he has held government posts such as Deputy Minister of Territorial Administration and Development, Governor of Shirag, and Minister of Agriculture. For more information on the participants in this episode, please check out our show notes at podcasts.groong.org/episode number. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.